You can start when you're ready.
In the previous video, we analyzed what a business plan is, why we write a business plan, who is the audience of a business plan. However, what we haven't seen yet is how to write the business plan. And this will be the main content of the current video lecture. So we are going to get deeper into the details of a business plan, the different components of a business plan, how this relates to the business model of a new venture, the profit formula, the value chain, and all the key economics principles behind a new venture creation. We're also going to see how a business plan will be evaluated by the readers of a business plan, how we can implement it, and finally, whenever there is some bump on our road towards the establishment of a new venture, how can we come up with some contingency plan, like a backup plan to avoid to stop our venture creation, and how can we deal with failure, because some business plans actually will lead to failure. So how can we pivot and change in case the business plan is deemed to fail? The good news is that business plans do have some guidelines, do have some similar structures. So through these guidelines, we can come up with a business plan that will look familiar to investors. So now what you may want to ask me is, why us entrepreneurs, that we innovate, that we come up with novelty, with new innovations in the market, in the business, why should we follow a standard structure, a standard in making our business plan? And here the answer is that the business plan is aimed at rather busy people. Investors are busy, and we don't pay so much attention to all the pitches and business plans that we receive all the time. And of course, it would take so much longer to identify the right information if you come up with a creative, different from the standard business plan. So here the suggestion is to focus on the content, to make the content of a business plan concise but precise, impactful, straight to the point, to gauge the interest of investors. So here the suggestion is quality over quantity. So really, the way to write a business plan should convey with precision, but also with a sense of excitement, what your venture will accomplish. However, we structure with some variation. So making some variation is of course not a problem, but the structure should somewhat be following the usual industry standard. And this is because for investors it would be so much easier to spot the right information and also to compare with other business plans, rather than coming up with something completely new that may actually not lead to the expected outcome. There are different types of business plan depending on the objective. So one business plan, and I think that student entrepreneurs, we generally compile this type of business plan, is the so-called summary business plan. So a summary business plan is generally a business plan between 10 to 15 pages. This is for ventures that are at a very early stage of development. Here, the key mission that you would like to achieve with this business plan is to test the waters, to see what are the reaction, maybe even just to gauge feedback from investors, from mentors, from potential partners, from potential suppliers, from potential employees, and so on. The second one, this would be a business plan that entrepreneurs will use when they are really pitching to get investment, could be seed investment and further on. So this is a full business plan. A full business plan will be around 30 pages, can be a little longer, also considering the appendix with like all the financial data and additional data, for example, contracts and so on. We will see this in this video lecture. What are the suggested documents that you should include in the appendix to give a sense of attraction that you already achieved in your business. This business plan is essentially a blueprint of your operations and what you would like to achieve with your company. And then the third type of business plan, this would be the business plan that you generally keep internally, because will have a lot of detailed information, in some cases also confidential information on your operations, on your workflow, on your technology and so on. So the higher the degree of confidentiality, the more you are likely to keep these internally only within your employees. And this is the operational business plan. The operational business plan will give to employees an idea on what your company is doing, the values of the company, how you work in the company, what are the processes in the company, what is the organizational chart in the company, and so on and so forth. Now, I will give you some further insights on the structure of a business plan, and I will focus specifically on a few parts of a business plan which are really key in the success of a business plan. One of them is the executive summary. The executive summary generally is at the beginning of a business plan, but should be prepared only after the total business plan has been written. And the reason is that the business plan should capture concisely, but in a very engaging way, what your venture will accomplish according to that business plan. So to an extent, in these 2-3 pages, you should provide all the high-level information that can make an impact on investors, stakeholders, potential partners, potential employees, and so on. So here, you should continuously challenge yourself when you write the executive summary, asking, so what? Meaning that each sentence in the executive summary should be valuable, should be meaningful, should really convey the value, the proposition of your business. And that's why this is the most complicated part of a business plan to write. What are you addressing in the executive summary? Of course, you're addressing the business concept and business model. You are addressing why you are unique, what is your advantage compared to other companies. And again, here you need to get enough in details to make a convincing statement. Because many people will claim, I'm unique, my solution is unique, but it actually is not. It is like thousands of other solutions in the market with some very slight variation. So this seems like an easy question, but it is not. And that's why my encouragement here is always to ask yourself, so what? So what? Am I really unique? Am I really convey in this sentence the uniqueness of my value proposition or not? And oftentimes when you keep challenging continuously and intensively your writing, you will understand that your writing is not that meaningful, your writing is not that impactful, and thereby investors are not likely to be influenced by your executive summary. In the executive summary, you're also including who are the co-founders of a business, why these co-founders, what these co-founders bring to the business, how the track record of the co-founders is an example of possible success in the business. How can this business make money? What is the profit formula behind the business? Is the profit formula really sustainable? Is the profit formula in line with the business model? For example, a platform, multi-sided platform business model in a very niche market generally is not likely to succeed, because one of the key drivers of success for a multi-sided platform business model is a large and scalable market. So if the entrepreneur will point out that he or she would like to implement a multi-sided platform business model in a very niche market, well, this will of course raise some concern from investors, because we know it's difficult to achieve this through multi-sided platform business model. Or in some industry, for example in edutech, education technology. So in education technology, generally it's more difficult to scale compared to other industry, compared to e-commerce, for instance. And that's why there was a market which was very appealing for education technology, which was the Chinese market. Large middle class, large market with a standard curriculum for 1.4 billion Chinese. Same language, same national curriculum. So these provided a huge scalability for education technology companies. And that's why in many other regions, while education technology companies are struggling because they lack this market scalability. Each country has its own language, its own curriculum, and so it's more difficult to scale compared to China and to an extent also Indian market. And we see that some of the most successful education technology startups come from either India or China. So this is just an example to explain that in the executive summary, of course, investors are well prepared, they know the market, and so when they see some assumption made by the entrepreneur about the profit formula, profitability and so on, of course they will immediately question it if they see that this does not match with what the industry, what the market generally say. So if you state that you are going to create an education technology company in Thailand and with very fast scalability, then these, of course, will raise some concern, again, some red flag when investors read this. So here the point is, really, in the executive summary, the information should not only be very relevant, very substantial, but should also be in line with market, industry, data, and so on. Few more points that you may want to add in the executive summary is possible exit from the investment. For example, whether investors can have an IPO in future, and so they can monetize from their investment. Moving on to the different components of a business plan. So first part will be more of an external analysis. So the external analysis will cover the so-called pastel trends, meaning the political, the economic, the social, the technology, the environmental, and the legal environment. Could be at national level, could be at regional level, depending on the scope of your venture, the scope of your business. You will also analyze the industry, how attractive the industry is. In some cases, for some business models, here you could use a very famous framework, which is the Forces framework by Michael Porter. This is a good framework for some business models, but not all. So make sure again that you're using the right tool for the right business model. In this section, you're also covering general market dynamics, market trends, because successful entrepreneurs generally are the entrepreneurs that are in the right market, right industry at the right moment. The second section of the business plan will cover a description of a venture. So the first part here is this concept of the job to be done. So this resonates with theories by Clayton Christensen, a famous professor that studied innovations. So one of his key theories is that companies should identify what job they are doing for their customers. So it's like the customer is hiring a company to do a job. The customer is hiring a company to solve a problem. So here in this section of the business plan, you should clearly explain this point. The job to be done. What problem you are solving and why your customer should hire you and not other competitors to do that job. In the venture description, you will also expand on your overall strategy, on your mission statement, or your vision, or your core values, and so on. A third chapter in your business plan will cover the operations. So here you should address all the key operation in the new venture. In case your new venture is in manufacturing, for example, advanced manufacturing, robotics, new manufacturing S-curve, such as aerospace, electric vehicles, and so on. So in this case, you should also add an accurate production plan. In general, your operation plan, whether the business is in manufacturing or in service, should cover all the main components from your value chain. So we analyze the value chain in some of the prior videos, but here you can find the value chain structure. So the value chain will consist of inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing and sales, and after sales service. So these are the so-called primary activities of a business. And then there are the support activities in a company. So the infrastructure of a firm, the human resource management, R&D, technology development, and procurement and supply chain. So when you prepare your operation plan, you can use the value chain as a map to cover all the operations, all the workflows, all the processes in both primary and support activities of your new venture. Also, the value chain is a key concept coming from the theories by Michael Porter. So moving on to other sections of a business plan. So after the operation plan, you can explain more about your go-to-market strategy. So this is how you are going to reach to your customer, specifically to your target segment. Here you can also consider a bit about the customer behavior and the innovation adoption. So how likely your customers are to adopt new innovations. So this is very important because if you are proposing to the market, you're introducing to the market a new innovative product or a new innovative service, you need to consider whether the market is ready and whether the market is likely to adopt this new innovation. There are many great examples of new innovations that were not adopted because it was not yet at the time the market was ready, the behavior to adopt new innovation was not there yet. Here you're also going to analyze your competition, and you should make business decisions that are based on data. So here you should give a sense of the data you collected to support your go-to-market strategy. An additional section for the business plan is what we can define, generally speaking, as economics of a venture. So here we should cover the business model, we should address the profit formula, we should identify the startup investment, the cost breakdown, estimated revenues, and so on. And also very important to identify what is the break-even point, where we will finally reach that point where our revenues are covering our cost. before concluding the business plan, 2 more sections are needed. One is the organizational plan. The organizational plan will give a sense of the ownership structure of a company. Corporate governance. Corporate governance means how you manage the company, who are the directors, what responsibilities the directors have in the company, what powers the directors have in the company. The board of directors, who are the members of the board of directors, what powers the board of directors have. Auditing, very important. A new company, it's important to have a proper auditing system to avoid any financial trouble, any financial mistake, any financial wrongdoing. In this part, you're also covering the shareholders' rights, which is an interesting point, of course, for investors that would like to know what kind of rights come with the class of shares, like, for example, voting right in the general meeting of the shareholders, the share allocation within your company. So here, focus will be on the employees of a company, the organizational chart, the HR culture, the HR plan, and so on. And then the final part will be a finance plan and a risk assessment plan. So the finance plan will address the feasibility, the investment needed, forecasted sales cost, the projection of cash flow, the projection of balance sheet. And also, you should here identify possible risk, especially financial risk on your operations, how you would minimize this risk, and how would you prevent this risk. So these are the main components of a business plan. To an extent, if you want, you may revise the narrative of a business plan. You can change some of the order of these main components of a business plan, and this is just to make your narrative, your storyline more consistent, also depending on the industry. So if you are in some specific industry where you would like to emphasize some key factors, so you can change the order of these components because you may want to give some key emphasis on some parts of your business model rather than other components of a business model. Is that it? Well, there is one part of a business model which is the appendix of a business plan, which is the appendix. And the appendix is also very important because in the appendix you have all the backup material which you do not include in your business plan because you would like the business plan to be engaging. But still, most likely investors, potential partners will go and see in the appendix how solid, how robust your business plan is. Because here there are basically the evidences that you did your homework. So in the appendix, for example, you can include like data from your research, but you can also add some letters from your customers, from your distributor, for your subcontractors, and this is a way to show your traction, to show that you are real, that you are doing business, that you are serving some customers already. You can also show other commercial agreement, distribution agreement, lease agreement, or any other contracts you have with your customer. Make sure if you are sharing some confidential information to avoid that, like the figures of a contract or some information to be disclosed, right? So you may append in the appendix the contracts, but then you will basically cover or take out, for example, the figures. Because you wouldn't want that these financial information to be released. Price list also can be included in the appendix. So after analyzing what are the main components of a business plan and the key function of the executive summary and the appendix, so how will the business plan be evaluated by investors, by banks, by potentially other stakeholders? So generally, the key focus for banks will be to see whether the company is able to pay back the debt and the interest, and consider that generally You can work with banks only when you are at some mature stage of your business, so not a very early stage. Investors will focus on different characteristics, so more on the behavior of the entrepreneur, his prior success of the entrepreneur, that entrepreneur and his or her team are able to execute that business plan. It's also important to consider how you're going to execute the business plan. And this is to an extent a way to create a positive feedback loop. So after you lay the foundation of a business plan, then to see that you are achieving the milestones of your business plan and that you are on track. Or if you can't achieve the milestone of a business plan because of some new conditions, some new circumstances in the market, that you are pivoting, and your pivoting is still backed up by data, backed up by figures collected in your organization that show that you need to change, you need to make an iteration, you need to adapt to these new circumstances. So this is the overall theme of monitoring the progresses, and it's very important because will help you track what's going on in the company, what is going right and what is going in the wrong direction. Some checkpoints can include your finance, your inventory, your QC, your quality control, your sales, and so on. It's also important, considering the unpredictability of markets, to have some contingency plan. So if some situation happens, for example, a pandemic with travel restrictions, stay-at-home orders, and so on, what will be your contingency plan? How key people in the organization can step up and make decision in the case of this change or sudden disaster happening, so as to ensure business continuity in your organization and not to shut down the operation all of a sudden. Final point that we are going to see in this video is why some business plans actually fail. So there are many reasons. Could be that the business objectives were not reasonable, that there was a lack of monitoring, a lack of control, a lack of this positive feedback loop to change and rapidly pivot whenever this was necessary. It could be because the entrepreneur did not have enough experience, or the entrepreneur didn't see threats coming his way, and so on. Generally, the biggest problem for business plans is that there was no real customer need. So there was no customer willing to hire your company to do that job. So this is generally the most common circumstance that will eventually lead to the failure of a business plan and the failure of a business as well. So to conclude on this video lecture, we have analyzed the main components of a business plan. We have stressed that it's very important to have a compelling, substantial executive summary. So this should be really the takeaway of this video, executive summary. Then we analyze the different elements of a business plan, and we also mentioned that some of them can be adapted depending on the specifics of your business model, of your industry, and your market. And finally, we have seen how investors and banks evaluate the business model, and finally some reasons why business model fails. One reason is that there is a lack of control, monitoring the implementation of a business plan, but generally the biggest reason is that your company is doing a job for which no one hired you to do it. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video lecture. Bye!